Welcome to Table for 92, element number 73, tantalum. It's number 73 because it has exactly 73 protons within its nucleus. If you've not heard of tantalum or don't know much about it, please sit down and watch this video and then watch it again. It is incredibly important. Tantalizing tantalum. It's named after yet another tragic ancient Greek character that did some weird stuff, kind of like all the ancient Greek characters. But for today, the cooking will be all about honey. If you believe in the religion of the ancient Greeks, which I'm sure there are some of you out there, then you know Tantalus stole nectar from the gods and gave it to us humans, nectar of the gods, honey. And we thank him for that. Praise Tantalus. We're gonna do honey glazed prawns and pancakes with honey and sesame seeds. These recipes come from ancient Greek sources that were compiled by the British Museum. There'll be a link to the recipes in the comments. But yeah, they're very good for being 2,500 years old. First off though, tantalum, the element. It has become extremely important in the past few decades, like a lot of these rare earth elements. That is something, you know, I just find so interesting about these. The discoverers almost never actually got to see their discoveries being used in anything. You know, they make their discoveries in like the early 1800s, but we're usually only able to like prove the existence of this element, not actually hold a pure form of the element, let alone see it used in something useful. These rare earth elements were just curiosities for the most part. It's like how most famous artists never enjoyed success during their own lifetime, except for Picasso. He got to party it up, but the other ones didn't. Anyway, tantalum was discovered in Sweden. Big surprise there. So many elements were found in Sweden, and so many more elements were like discovered in other countries, but the minerals they were discovered in actually came from Sweden. They just were extracted in a lab somewhere else. So anyway, tantalum is known as a technology critical element, which means they're critical to technology. Right. This has only been found in the past few decades, though. Most of the rare earth elements are considered technology critical. Tantalum isn't a rare earth element, but it is considered a critical rare metal, so to complicate it even more. So you got simple ancient Greek pancakes for tantalum. Mix together 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of water, a tablespoon of some good honey, nectar of the gods. Blend that all smooth. Add like 2 tablespoons of oil to a skillet. Fry those pancakes until they're golden brown on both sides. Should make like 4 large pancakes. And while that's going, toast some sesame seeds. So it was 1802 when the Swedish chemist Anders Eckerberg was able to separate the metal from 2 different minerals. One from Sweden, Ytterby, where so many of the elements were discovered, and one from Finland, or at least what is now Finland. In 1802, it was still part of the Kingdom of Sweden. It's funny how these findings sometimes work, because while Eckerberg announced the discovery, it wasn't like he had a sample of the stuff, right? Like I was saying before. He just said he's got something new theoretically. So yeah, after Eckerberg made his discovery, there was a lot of opposition, which is, you know, it's totally normal in science, especially in like the early 1800s when things were a little more ambiguous, because so much was still unknown at the time. But even today, when a new discovery in science is made, there's like huge controversies all the time. But yeah, remember, this is before the real addition of the periodic table was put out there. So really early days in chemistry here. Like there used to be this idea there were only 4 elements: earth, air, water, and fire. Yeah, you know, it's like the last airbender. Like oxygen would be considered an air. Mercury, because it's liquid at room temperature, would be considered a water. And tantalum, being a silvery metal, would be an earth. Not that they had any at the time, but that's an earth is like a metal, right? That idea was still kind of floating around in the late 1700s, early 1800s, but you know, it was like slowly being eroded away with each new discovery. So, you know, this is just a reminder of like how contentious any new discovery of an element would be. The tantalum discovery was even more complicated because a very similar element named niobium had been discovered the year before, except it wasn't called niobium yet. More on that later. So there were a lot of people just saying that this tantalum stuff, this new discovery Eckerberg had put out there, was just impure niobium or just a mistake Eckerberg made. But alas, all the haters were wrong. It would take a while until we were 100% sure niobium and tantalum were different elements, and therein lies the naming of tantalum. This is where it gets weird. So I've already had an episode about niobium. I cooked some great meats mentioned in the Iliad, you know, other ancient Greek recipes, and it was fantastic. A lot of lamb and a lot of goat. Speaking of, let's do a quick marinade for the prawns. Just 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 2 tablespoons fish sauce, 2 tablespoons good honey. Fish sauce is really interesting though. It's almost always associated with like Southeast Asian cuisine today. That's, you know, made with anchovies, salt, and water, and it's concentrated for the flavor. So the fish sauce in ancient Greece was called garum, and it was made with fish, intestines, salt, and water, and also concentrated. And it was a really big deal in the ancient Mediterranean world. Anyway, it's super pungent. So for like my taste, I'm toning it down a bit, but you know, this kind of shows how tastes are different based on culture. For me, it's too much fish sauce, but for them, they probably went nuts over it. All right, so Niobium was named after Niobe. She's a tragic character in ancient Greek mythology. She's the daughter of Tantalum. She had 6 daughters and 6 sons, and kind of rubbed that fact that she had all these kids in the face of a titan named Leto, who only had 2 children. So the god Apollo killed her 6 sons, while the goddess Artemis killed her 6 daughters. This all happened in the Iliad, and Niobe was kind of like the archetypal grieving mother in Greek mythology. Yeah, like the ancient Greeks. I mean, all mythology in the world is weird through modern lenses, but man, that's rough. Oh, and Niobe went home and then was turned into stone, and it's still there at Mount Sisyphus. So niobium was discovered in 1801 and tantalum the year after. Since Niobe and basically everybody in ancient Greek mythology had a terrible life, it's altogether fitting and proper that Tantalus would also have a terrible life. You know, it's just a family tradition. So I guess the real takeaway from this is like, don't piss off the gods. That's like what all these stories are basically about. They piss off the gods and the gods do terrible things to them. So yeah, Tantalus was a naughty boy. He pissed off the gods by taking the secrets from the heavens, from the gods, taking these secrets and giving them to the humans, us mortal humans, specifically nectar and ambrosia. We're not sure exactly what those are. Nectar, though, almost certainly is honey. That's what they're referring to, nectar. Ambrosia, it's a little more confusing. It was just the food or the drink of the gods that gave them their, you know, immortality. But we don't know really like what it was supposed to be. But I think it's funny because I think ambrosia salad, like the world's most unhealthy salad. You know, it's like that stuff from that 1970s cocktail parties where it's like, you know, oh yes, the secret food of the gods is mayonnaise and whipped cream mixed with canned fruit. Yeah, it's like, that would just be really funny to me, like an image in my head of Greek gods having ambrosia salad, and that's what like makes them immortal. But yeah, we don't know what ambrosia is. So Tantalus, his punishment for giving humans honey definitely did not fit the crime. He was tortured for eternity by being placed in neck-high water with a fruit tree hanging above him. And every time he tried to drink the water, it would recede. And every time he reached for fruit, it would be out of reach. And so this is where the word tantalize comes from, right? Something always out of reach. It's tantalizing, huh? I think our modern definition is a little lighter though. Like if you tantalize something, you aren't associating that with like eternal torture. But yeah, that is where the word tantalize comes from Tantalus in ancient Greek mythology. So yeah, don't piss off the gods, moral of that story. Eckeberg was reminded of Tantalus's plight when naming tantalum. It turns out tantalum doesn't react when plunged into acid, and that reminded Eckeberg of the Tantalus story. However, way before Eckeberg made his discovery, an American scientist named John Winthrop in 1734 in Massachusetts discovered an interesting mineral and sent it off to England, but nobody bothered to study it until 1801 when another scientist named Charles Hatchett claimed to find a new element in the mineral, and he named it columbium after the United States, after Columbus and District of Columbia and all that. That element was probably a mixture of what we now call niobium and tantalum. If you're confused by this, that's fine, so am I. In 1809, another guy named William Hyde Wollaston, English chemist, declared that columbium and tantalum were identical and kept the name tantalum for them both. Years later, a German chemist named Heinrich Rose in 1846 declared that columbium and tantalum were different and changed the name of columbium to niobium and tantalum to palopium. Both were the names of daughters of Tantalus. Over the next 20 years, it was finally formalized that these two substances were different elements, and the names niobium and tantalum were finally accepted by most of the chemists. So it's confusing. Like, this happens with a lot of elements. There's all this controversy, these different discoveries, so they're getting different names. Even in some places, columbium is still used instead of tantalum. I know, it's weird. So what is tantalum used for? It is a conflict mineral, but why? First off, there's like 2,000 tons of tantalum mined every year out of the earth. And there's about 40 milligrams of tantalum within every iPhone on Earth. And there are like 6.8 billion smartphones in use in the world right now, and that number is not going down anytime soon. So the tantalum in phones is used specifically in capacitors that regulate voltage and store electrical charge. But it is also part of the audio, making the sound a lot clearer. It does make me wonder what the flux capacitor capacitor is made of. The reason tantalum is a conflict mineral is that, surprise, the main sources are found in conflict zones that help to fuel the violence. While everyone that needs it in manufacturing can pretty much like turn a blind eye to all that going on, that is because tantalum is not traded as a commodity on the stock market like other precious metals like gold, silver, palladium, etc. So the prices are hypothetically set by the supply and demand of the precious metals. I mean, I think we all know there are some inherent problems with that system, but like, you know, there it is. Tantalum though, and other rare earth minerals, their prices are set by the dealers. So we don't really know how much the stuff is worth and how many lives are adversely affected by the trade. The weird thing is that, you know, for a long time, there were a couple mines in Western Australia that produced like 30% of the tantalum on Earth, but they shut down in 2008, citing the global financial crisis and falling tantalum demand. But this doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, considering like smartphones were exploding in popularity in 2008. You know, still though, after they shut down, almost all of the tantalum mining in the world moved to the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda, which is where the whole conflict mineral thing comes into play. You know, if you don't know how bad the trade is in the DRC, I'm not going to get into it here, but man, there's some articles, you know, you can read about the tantalum resources. But, you know, tantalum resources are expected to run out by 2060 if we don't come up with some kind of comprehensive recycling program. Okay, so to recap, tantalum is used in pretty much everything we hold dear to our daily lives right now. It mostly is mined out of conflict zones. It's about to run out and is named after somebody who stole secrets from the gods and gave it to us mortals, for which he was tortured for eternity. Totally worth the honey pancakes though. These prawns are really good, but man, that fish sauce is like an acquired taste in this amount. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna make like little shrimp tacos. If you look at this plate, this is everything that you could have had on an ancient Greek plate. You know, you got to remember, back then they didn't have potatoes, they didn't have tomatoes, they didn't have peppers. That all comes from the New World. So all this right here, this kind of recipe could be tens of thousands of years old. Thank you, Tantalus, for the honey. It really helps with the whole fish sauce situation. Thanks. See you next time.